The station floated in the dark between stars. It was old and forgotten, like a toy left behind by a child who had grown up and moved away. The Galactic Union called it Velar 9. The people who worked there called it the end of the line. Inside, the station lived 347 children. They came from 23 different planets. They spoke different languages. They had different colored skin, different numbers of eyes, different shapes of bodies. Some had fur. Some had scales. Some glowed softly in the dark. But they all had one thing in common. They had no families left. The Helix War had taken everything from them. 6 years ago, great ships had crossed the galaxy and burned world after world. Cities turned to ash. Oceans boiled away. Billions died in fire and silence. When the war ended, these children were all that remained of their peoples. The Galactic Union gathered them up and placed them here, on this quiet station, where they would be fed and sheltered and slowly forgotten. Marcus Chen was the only human on Velar 9. He worked as the custodian. This meant he fixed broken things, cleaned dirty places, and kept the station running. It was not an important job. Nobody thanked him for it. Nobody noticed when he did it well. But Marcus did not mind. He had learned long ago that the small jobs were often the ones that mattered most. He was 53 years old. His hair was gray at the edges. His hands were rough from years of work. Before coming to Velar 9, he had worked on cargo ships and mining stations and colony outposts. He had seen much of the galaxy. He had learned that most species thought humans were strange. Humans laughed too loud. Humans formed attachments too easily. Humans did foolish things for emotional reasons. Marcus had heard all of this before. He did not argue with it. He simply continued being human. It was during the night cycle when he found the first letter. The station created artificial darkness for 8 hours each day. This helped the children sleep. During this time, Marcus liked to do his repair work. The corridors were quiet. The children were in their beds. He could focus on his tasks without interruption. He was fixing a heating vent in Dormitory 7 when he saw something strange. A small piece of paper was tucked behind the metal grate. It was folded very carefully, like someone had taken great care with it. Marcus pulled it out and opened it. The writing was messy. It had been translated through a cheap computer program, so the words were a little odd. But the meaning was clear. Dear Santa of Earth, I am Keth. I am a Rick's child. My people do not have holidays like humans do. But I saw a story on the old Earth broadcasts. In the story, human children write letters to a man in red clothes. He brings them presents if they have been good. I have tried to be good. I do not know if it counts for alien children, but I am asking anyway. I would like a Rick's sleeping crystal, the kind that sings. My mother had one. She would play it for me at night before the fire came from the sky. I know this is probably not real. I know you are probably just a story, but I wanted to try. Thank you. Keth, age 8 in Earth years. Marcus sat down on the cold floor of the corridor. He read the letter again. Then he read it a third time. The Vricks were a species with hard shells and gentle eyes. They had lived on a water world with great coral cities. The war had boiled their oceans dry. Only a handful of their children had survived, rescued by evacuation ships in the final hours. Keth was one of them. Marcus had seen her in the dining hall. She was small and quiet. She sat alone at the end of the long tables and ate her nutrient paste without speaking. He had never heard her laugh. He folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. Over the next 7 days, Marcus found more letters. They were hidden everywhere, tucked into air vents, slipped under doors, folded into the gaps of machinery he was repairing, pushed into the recycling chutes. The children had been writing them in secret, hiding them in places where only the custodian would find them. Each letter broke his heart in a different way. A Russian child named Myra wrote that she wanted to taste real food. Just once. The station only served nutrient paste because it was cheap and efficient. She had seen pictures of earth fruits in an old database. Round and red and sweet. She dreamed about them sometimes. Twin Karathi children named Voss and Vera asked for a picture of their home planet. Just one picture. They were very young when the evacuation happened. They could not remember what Korath 7 looked like. The databases had been destroyed in the war. They did not want to forget completely. A tiny Gelth child had asked for a friend. The Gelth did not speak with words. They communicated through patterns of light that glowed from their skin. This child had written, through a translation program, that they wanted a friend who does not leave. The child slept alone in a corner of dormitory 12. None of the other children knew how to talk to them. 40-3 letters. Then 50. Then more. Marcus read every single one. The children were not supposed to know that he found them. But somehow, they did. He would see them watching him sometimes, with their different eyes, from across the dining hall or down the long corridors. They never said anything. They just watched. And the letters kept appearing. They had heard about Santa Claus from old Earth entertainment broadcasts that sometimes played on the station's screens. They did not fully understand the tradition. They did not know about Christmas trees or stockings or reindeer. They only knew that somewhere in human culture, there was a story about a kind man who brought gifts to children who had nothing. They were asking a myth for help. Marcus sat alone in his small quarters on the 7th night. The letters were spread out on his bed. 43 wishes from 43 children. Some asked for impossible things. Some asked for simple things. All of them asked with the quiet desperation of young hearts that had learned not to hope too hard. He thought about his own childhood. He thought about cold December mornings and the smell of pine trees. He thought about his mother's hands wrapping presents in bright paper. He thought about the magic of waking up to find that someone had remembered you, that someone had cared enough to give. These children had no one to remember them. The galaxy had moved on. The war was over. The politicians had made their speeches and signed their treaties and returned to their comfortable lives. These 347 children were a footnote in history, a statistic on a report, a budget line that got smaller every year. But Marcus was here. Marcus had found their letters. And Marcus was human. Humans did foolish things for emotional reasons. He picked up his communication tablet and began to make a list. A long, impossible list. Then he started making calls. Commander Dazes was not a fool. She had run the Orphan Sanctuary on Villa 9 for 11 years. She had seen administrators come and go. She had watched budgets shrink and staff disappear. She had learned to notice things that others missed. It was the only way to survive in a forgotten place. And she had noticed that something was very wrong with the human custodian. Dizes belonged to a species called the Volanti. They were tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected light like polished metal. Their faces showed little emotion. Their voices were calm and flat. They valued logic above all things. Lying was considered a mental illness among the Volanti. They simply could not understand why anyone would say something. That was not true. This made them very bad at detecting lies, but even Dizes could see that. Marcus Chen was behaving strangely. The human had been working at odd hours. He was always awake during the night cycle, moving through corridors that did not need maintenance. He had been receiving communication signals from outside the station, far more than normal. And there were the cargo shipments. 6 unmarked containers had arrived at the station over the past 2 weeks. They had come on different ships from different routes. None of them appeared in the official supply manifest. When Dizes checked the cargo bay, The containers were gone. "Custodian-chan," she said, stopping him in corridor 9. "I require an explanation." Marcus looked at her. His face was difficult to read. Human faces were soft and mobile, always shifting between expressions. Thizes found them unsettling. "What kind of explanation, Commander?" "Unauthorized cargo has been arriving at this station. You have been present for each delivery. The items have disappeared. Where are they?" Marcus did not blink. "Maintenance supplies," he said. "Specialized equipment for the air recycling system. I filed the requisitions. The station computer has no record of these requisitions. There must be a filing backlog. You know how the system gets during budget review season." Thizes stared at him for a long moment. Her cranial ridges shifted slightly, a sign of doubt. But she had other concerns. The quarterly health inspection was coming. The budget committee wanted new reports. There was always more paperwork, more bureaucracy, more demands from officials who never visited and did not care. One strange human was a low-priority problem. "See that your documentation is updated," she said, and walked away. Marcus let out a long breath. That had been close. He returned to his work, moving through the station with new care. He had to be more careful now. Thizes was watching him. If she discovered what he was really doing, she would have to report it. Unauthorized gifts were against regulations. Smuggling items onto a Union facility was technically a crime. Marcus could lose his job. He could be arrested. He kept going anyway. The packages were hidden in Storage Bay 7, a small room at the far end of the station that had been sealed for maintenance. Marcus had told the computer that the bay needed repairs to its environmental systems. This gave him an excuse to keep it locked. No one else could enter. Inside, the gifts were piling up. 7 brick sleeping crystals in velvet cases. A stasis container filled with fresh strawberries, still cold and sweet. 2 photographs of Korath 7, printed on paper that would never fade. A glowing orb that pulsed with soft light, handmade by an engineer who had worked on it for 3 weeks. Toys and books and musical instruments and medicine and seeds and 100 other things. Each one meant for a specific child. Each one carried across the stars by humans who wanted to help. But Marcus was not working alone anymore. On the other side of the galaxy, the conspiracy had grown. Rodriguez, the cargo pilot, was now coordinating with 6 other pilots. They had created a secret route, passing packages from ship to ship, avoiding official checkpoints. They called it the Santa Run. Dr. Webb, the scientist, was working with a network of researchers to find items from destroyed cultures. Things that should not exist anymore. Music recordings from silenced worlds. Traditional clothing from peoples who have been scattered across the galaxy. Recipes for foods that no one alive remembered how to make. The toy maker on Luna had recruited 20 other craftspeople. They were working day and night, creating gifts by hand. Each one was unique. Each one was made with love. And across human space, ordinary people were doing extraordinary things. A cargo loader on Station Minerva was hiding packages in his shipments, marking them as spare parts. A customs officer on the Cygnus checkpoint was looking the other way when certain containers passed through. A communications officer on a Union relay station was delaying reports about unusual transmissions from VELAR-9. None of them would ever be thanked. None of them would ever be recognized. If they were caught, they would face consequences. But they kept going, because somewhere on a forgotten station, 347 children had written letters to a myth. And humans, foolish humans, had decided to answer them. Marcus thought about this sometimes, late at night when he could not sleep. He thought about all the people he had never met who were risking things for children they had never seen. He thought about the pilot burning through her fuel budget to make unscheduled stops. He thought about the engineer spending his own money on materials for the light orb. He thought about the fruit merchant who had paid for stasis containers out of his own pocket. Why did they do it? What did they gain? Nothing. They gained nothing. There was no profit in this. No reward, no recognition. The children would never know their names. The galaxy would never know what they had done. But they did it anyway. This was the thing about humans that other species could not understand. Humans did not always act in their own interest. They did not always make logical choices. They saw a child crying in the dark, and something inside them broke open. They saw a need, and they filled it. They saw suffering, and they could not walk away. It was foolish. It was inefficient. It was completely irrational. It was also beautiful. 18 days before Christmas, Marcus received a message from Rodriguez. "Final shipment is on the way," she said. "All items accounted for." "We did it, Chun. We actually did it." Marcus looked at his list. 347 names. 347 wishes. 347 gifts. Every single one. He closed his eyes and felt something warm spread through his chest. It was pride, he realized. Not pride in himself, but pride in his species. Pride in the humans scattered across the galaxy, who had come together for this impossible task. The children had asked a myth for help, and humanity had answered. The station's computer system was very efficient. It controlled everything on Vela 9. The lights, the air, the water, the food. It also controlled all the supplies that came to the station. Nothing arrived without the computer knowing about it. Nothing was ordered without the computer approving it. Marcus learned this when he tried to order 7 Vrix sleeping crystals. "Custodian Chun," the computer said in its flat, mechanical voice. "Your request for Vrix sleeping crystals does not match any maintenance requirement. The request has been denied." Marcus had expected this. He had worked in bureaucracies his whole life. He knew how they operated. They were machines, just like the station computer. They followed rules. They did not understand feelings. They did not make exceptions for crying children or broken hearts. So Marcus did not waste time arguing. He simply found another way. His first call went to his sister Sarah on Earth. She was a teacher in a small town in what used to be called Canada. She had 3 children of her own. When Marcus explained what he was trying to do, she was quiet for a long moment. "You want to get Christmas presents for 347 alien orphans," she said. "Yes, on a station in the middle of nowhere. Yes. And you have no money and no way to get supplies through official channels." "That is correct," Sarah laughed. It was a good laugh, warm and full of love. "Well," she said, "I guess we better get started. Let me make some calls." That was how it began. Sarah called her friends. Her friends called their friends. Teachers and doctors and farmers and shopkeepers, all connected by invisible threads across the human worlds. Each one heard the story. Each one asked how they could help. Marcus called old friends from his years on cargo ships. Rodriguez was a pilot who flew freight routes through the outer systems. She owed Marcus a favor from 3 years ago when he fixed her ship's cooling system during an emergency stop. When he asked if she could carry some packages to Vela 9, she did not hesitate. "Tell me when and where," she said. "I will make it happen." Okonkwo was an engineer on a deep space construction platform. He built things with his hands. Machines, tools, devices. When Marcus described the Gelf child, who wanted a friend that would not leave, Okonkwo went quiet for a while. "A friend," he said slowly. "That glows. That responds to the child's light. Yes, I do not know if such a thing exists." "It does not exist," Okonkwo said. "But I can make it exist. Give me 2 weeks." The requests went out across human space like ripples in water. Each one touched another human, who touched another, who touched another. None of them knew the children they were helping. None of them would ever meet them. But they helped anyway. A retired scientist named Dr. Webb lived on a research station near Arcturus. She had spent her career studying alien biology. When Marcus asked about Vrick's sleeping crystals, she knew exactly where to find them. They were mined on one of the moons of the Vrick's homeworld, she said. The moon was abandoned after the war, but there is a salvage crew that still works the old tunnels. I know someone who knows someone. Let me see what I can do. 3 days later, she called back. I found them. 7 crystals still in their original cases. The salvage crew is sending them through a merchant route. They should reach Rodriguez in about 10 days. Marcus wrote it down on his list. Vrick's sleeping crystals. Found. The fruit was harder. The Theshan child named Mira had asked for real food. Something fresh. Something that was not nutrient paste. Marcus remembered the letter. I saw pictures of earth fruits. Round and red and sweet. I dream about them sometimes. Strawberries. She was describing strawberries, but fresh fruit could not survive the journey through space. It would rot long before it reached VO9. The only way to transport it was in stasis, a special container that froze time inside. Stasis containers were expensive. Very expensive. Marcus called a fruit merchant named Yusuf, who worked the trade routes near the Cygnus system. Yusuf laughed when he heard the request. Fresh strawberries to VO9? Do you know how much that would cost? The stasis fees alone would be more than my monthly income. I know, Marcus said. I am asking anyway. Yusuf was quiet. You said these are orphans? Yes, from the Helix War. The war that killed billions. Yes. Marcus heard Yusuf take a deep breath. I have a daughter, the merchant said quietly. She is 8 years old. She loves strawberries. She eats them every morning with her breakfast. I cannot imagine a child who has never tasted one. He paused. Send me the coordinates. I will figure out the stasis problem myself. The list grew shorter. Item by item, the impossible became possible. A cultural preservation society on Earth had archives of old planetary photographs. They began searching their databases for images of Korath 7, the homeworld of the twin children Voss and Vera. It took 6 days, but they found one. A single image taken by a survey satellite decades ago, before the war. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. A beautiful world, frozen in time. They printed 2 copies on special paper that would last 100 years. A boson in time. They printed 2 copies on special paper that would last 100 years. A Crozen in time. Toymaker on Luna heard about the project and offered to help. She made things by hand, the old way, carving and painting and sewing. She asked for a list of the children's species and ages. Then she got to work. A chaplain on a diplomatic ship used her connections to find items that could not be bought in any market. Medical supplies for children with special needs. Musical instruments from destroyed cultures. Seeds from plants that no longer grew anywhere in the galaxy. Words spread through human networks in quiet ways. Through late-night calls between old friends. Through messages passed along cargo routes. Through the invisible web of humans who still remembered what it meant to be small and forgotten. Not everyone could give money. Not everyone could ship packages. But everyone gave something. A teacher recorded bedtime stories in English, translated into a dozen alien languages. An artist drew pictures of each child's homeworld, based on whatever references she could find. A musician composed a lullaby using harmonics that would be soothing to species with different kinds of hearing. Marcus worked 18 hours a day. He coordinated shipments and tracked packages and answered messages from strangers who wanted to help. He did not sleep much. He did not eat much. He kept thinking about the children in their dormitories, sleeping alone in the dark, dreaming about a myth in red clothes who might answer their letters. 3 weeks before the Earth holiday called Christmas, Marcus looked at his list. Every name had something next to it. Every wish had been answered. Some gifts were exactly what the children had asked for. Some were close substitutes, the best that could be found. But no child had been forgotten. 347 presents were making their way across the galaxy, carried by humans who had never met the children they were helping. Marcus put down his tablet and sat in the quiet of his small room. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. December 24th, Terran Standard Calendar. The station lights dimmed at 2100 hours, beginning the night cycle. The children finished their evening nutrient paste and walked to their dormitories. They climbed into their sleeping pods and pulled their thin blankets over their bodies. The corridors grew quiet. The hum of the station's engines was the only sound. Marcus did not sleep. He sat in his small quarters, watching the clock on his wall. He had done this many times before, on other stations, in other years. Christmas Eve, the longest night, the night of waiting. When he was a child, he could never sleep on this night. He would lie awake in his bed, listening for the sound of footsteps on the roof. He knew Santa Claus was not real. Even at 6 years old, he understood that the presents came from his mother and father. But the magic was real. The feeling was real. The knowledge that someone had thought about him, planned for him, wanted to make him happy. That feeling was what he wanted to give these children. At 0200 hours, he began. Storage Bay 7 was cold and dark. Marcus opened the door and looked at the mountains of packages inside. 347 gifts, each one wrapped in whatever material he had been able to find. Some were in proper boxes. Some were wrapped in cloth. Some were simply placed in bags with handwritten labels. He loaded them onto a small cargo cart, working quietly and quickly. The wheels of the cart were silent. He had oiled them himself. No sound could give him away. The first stop was Dormitory 7. The Vrick's children slept in specialized pods filled with warm water. Their bodies floated gently, their shells reflecting the dim emergency lights. Marcus moved between them like a shadow. He found Kath's pod and placed a velvet box beside it. Inside was a singing crystal, pale blue and perfect. When the morning light hit it, it would begin to hum with the same melody that Kath's mother had played for her long ago on a world that no longer existed. Marcus looked at the small Vrick's child for a moment. Her antennae twitched in her sleep. Her claws were curled against her chest. She was dreaming about something. He hoped it was a good dream. He moved on. Dormitory 12 housed the children with special environmental needs. The Gelf child was here, in a corner pod designed for their species. The Gelf did not breathe air like other species. They absorbed nutrients through their skin and communicated through patterns of bioluminescent light. This child was the loneliest on the station. The other children could not understand their language. The staff did not have time to learn it. The Gelf child spent most of their days alone, flickering with light that no one answered. Marcus placed the orb beside their pod. It was warm to the touch, powered by a small internal battery. Okonkwo had programmed it to respond to light patterns with light patterns of its own. It could not speak. It could not think. But it could answer. When the Gelf child flickered, the orb would flicker back, a friend who would not leave. Marcus moved through the station, dormitory by dormitory, pod by pod. His back ached. His knees hurt. He was not a young man anymore, but he kept moving. The strawberries went to Myra, the Veshan child. They were still cold from the stasis container, still red and perfect. He placed them in a small bowl beside her pod, where she would see them first thing when she woke. The photographs went to Voss and Vera. the Karathi twins. One copy for each of them. Their home planet, preserved forever in print. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. Something to remember. He delivered toys and books and musical instruments. He placed medicine beside sick children who needed it. He left seeds in small pots for children whose species grew living things as part of their culture. He found the child who had asked for recordings of their mother's voice, and he placed the small audio device where they would find it. The hours passed. The station remained silent. Marcus worked until his hands were shaking and his legs could barely hold him up. He worked until every gift was delivered. Every name was crossed off his list. Every wish was answered. When the station's lights began to brighten, signaling the start of the day cycle. He was standing in the corridor outside Dormitory 7. His cart was empty. His body was exhausted, but his heart was full. The first sound came from Dormitory 7. It was a cry, high and sharp. For a terrible moment, Marcus thought something was wrong. Then the cry changed, became something else. Something he had not heard on this station in 2 years. Laughter. It spread like fire. From Dormitory 7 to Dormitory 8 to Dormitory 9. Children were waking up and finding gifts beside their pods. They were shouting to each other in a dozen different languages. They were running into the corridors, holding their presents, showing them to anyone who would look. Marcus leaned against the wall and watched them. A Theshan child ran past, juice dripping down her chin, her face covered in red smears from the strawberries she was eating as fast as she could. She was crying and laughing at the same time. 2 Karathi twins stood together, holding their photographs, staring at the image of their lost home. They did not speak. They just held hands and looked. A tiny Gelf child sat in the corridor, flickering with light. Beside them, a small orb flickered back. The child reached out and touched it gently, and the orb glowed brighter in response. Commander Thizes found Marcus standing there. "Custodian Chun," she said. Her voice was as flat as always, but her cranial ridges were shifting in confusion. "There has been a security breach. Unauthorized items have been distributed throughout the dormitories. Explain." Marcus looked at her. He was too tired to lie anymore. "It is a human tradition, Commander. We call it Christmas. I do not understand. What is the purpose of these items?" "They are gifts. For the children." "Gifts?" Thizes repeated the word as if she had never heard it before. "But these children are not human. Why would you give them human gifts?" Marcus thought about this question. He had been asked it many times over the past few weeks. Why are you doing this? What do you gain? What is the point? He looked at the children running through the corridors, their faces bright with joy. He looked at the Gelf child, no longer alone, talking to their new friend in patterns of light. He looked at the Vrix child Keth, holding her singing crystal, tears running down her face as the melody played. "Because they asked," he said simply. "And we could answer." Thizes stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away, her silver skin catching the light. Marcus slid down the wall and sat on the floor. He was exhausted. He was happy. He was crying. In the corridor, a Theshan child stopped running and looked at him. Her mouth was still covered in strawberry juice. She walked over and sat down beside him. "Thank you," she said in careful, accented English. "Thank you for the red food. It tastes like my dreams." Marcus laughed and cried at the same time. "You are welcome," he said. "Merry Christmas." Commander Thizes wrote her report the next day. It was 17 pages long. She detailed everything. The unauthorized gifts, the smuggled cargo, the falsified supply manifests, the network of human civilians who had conspired to bring contraband onto a Galactic Union facility, every regulation that had been broken, every protocol that had been ignored. She also included the psychological assessment data from the station's medical system. The numbers were surprising. In the days following what the human custodian called Christmas, the children's mental health scores improved by 34%. Night terrors decreased by half. Social engagement increased dramatically. Several children who had not spoken in months began talking again. The Gelf child, who had been classified as severely isolated, was now communicating regularly with the staff through their new, light-responsive device. Dizes did not understand these results. She included them in the report anyway, because that was her job. The report went up the chain of command. It was reviewed by a union oversight committee. A formal reprimand was drafted for Custodian Marcus Chun. Charges were considered. Punishments were discussed. And then something unexpected happened. The human ambassador to the Galactic Union requested a meeting. Her name was Ambassador Okafor. She was a tall woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She had served in the diplomatic corps for 30 years. She had negotiated treaties and resolved conflicts and represented humanity to 100 different species. She came to the committee meeting with a delegation. Not diplomats, not politicians, just people. A cargo pilot named Rodriguez, an engineer named Okonkwo, a fruit merchant named Yusuf, a scientist named Webb, a toy maker from Luna, a chaplain from a diplomatic vessel. Dozens of ordinary humans who had helped make the impossible happen. "We are here," Ambassador Okafor said, "to speak on behalf of Marcus Chun, and to answer any questions the committee may have about what occurred on Valor 9. The committee chair was a Volante. Like Commander Dizes, he looked at the crowd of humans with visible confusion. "This is irregular," he said. "The matter involves administrative violations and smuggling charges." Why would the human ambassador involve herself in such a minor case? Ambassador Okafor smiled. "Because this case is not minor." "Not to us." She explained what had happened. The letters from the children. The network of humans who had responded. The gifts that had crossed the galaxy, passed from hand to hand, carried by strangers who would never meet the children they were helping. The committee listened in silence. When she finished, the chair spoke again. "I still do not understand. What was the strategic purpose of this action? What did humanity gain?" "Nothing," Ambassador Okafor said. "Nothing? There was no strategic purpose. There was no political advantage. There was no profit or benefit of any kind. We did it because children asked for help, and we could not ignore them. But they are not human children. That does not matter." The committee members looked at each other. They did not understand. They came from species that valued logic and efficiency. They made decisions based on cost and benefit. The idea of spending vast resources on strangers for no return was incomprehensible to them. Ambassador Okafor saw their confusion. She took a deep breath. "Let me tell you something about humans," she said. "A long time ago, we were very young and very alone. We lived on a small planet at the edge of an ordinary galaxy. We had no allies, no protection, no one to help us when things were hard. And things were often hard." She paused. "But we had each other. And somewhere along the way, we learned something important. When one person is suffering, we all suffer. When one child is crying in the dark, something inside us breaks. We cannot walk away. We cannot pretend we do not see. It goes against everything we are." "This seems inefficient," the Volante chair said. "It is completely inefficient," Ambassador Okafor agreed. "It is also the only reason we survived. We took care of each other. We carried each other when we could not walk. We shared what little we had. We remembered each person who helped us, and we passed that help forward to the next person who needed it." She looked at the delegation behind her. The pilots and engineers and merchants and scientists who had given their time and money and effort for children they would never meet. "Someone did this for us once," she said. "Someone gave us something we did not deserve and could not repay. And we never forgot. We have been passing it forward ever since." The committee was silent for a long time. Finally, the chair spoke. "The charges against Custodian Chen will be reviewed. But I have a question first. You say this tradition has continued among humans for many generations. What do you call it?" Ambassador Okafor smiled. "We call it Christmas, but it has many names in many cultures. The winter holiday, the festival of lights, the feast of giving. The names do not matter. What matters is the feeling, the knowledge that someone thought of you, that someone cared enough to give." The charges against Marcus Chen were quietly dropped. 6 months later, the Terran Winter Gift Initiative was formally established. It began as a small program, humans volunteering to provide gifts for orphan children on Union stations. But it grew quickly. Other species wanted to understand. They sent observers. They asked questions. They studied the humans who participated. "Why do you do this?" They asked. "What is the purpose? What do you gain?" The answers were always the same. "Because we can. Because they need it. Because someone did it for us." Slowly, other species began to participate. Not many at first, but a few. A Volanthi administrator who remembered the joy on the children's faces. A Deshan merchant who had seen the fruit shipments pass through his station. A Karathi artist who wanted to create images of lost worlds. The tradition spread. On Vela 9, Marcus Chen continued his work as custodian. He fixed broken things. He cleaned dirty places. He kept the station running. It was not an important job. Nobody thanked him for it, but every year, as December approached, the children would begin writing their letters. "Dear Santa, dear Red Man, dear kind human who answers wishes." And every year, Marcus would read them. And every year, he would make his calls. The network was larger now. Thousands of humans across hundreds of worlds, all connected by the simple desire to help. They did not know each other. They did not ask for thanks. They just did the work. Because somewhere in the galaxy, there were children who had nothing. And humans could not ignore them. On the last night of his 5th Christmas on Vela 9, Marcus sat in his quarters and read a new letter that had been slipped under his door. "Dear Santa, thank you for last year. The singing crystal still plays my mother's song. I listen to it every night. This year, I do not want anything for myself. But I have friends who need help. They are in other stations, other orphanages. They have never heard of Christmas. They do not know about the Red Man who answers letters. Can you help them too?" Marcus smiled. He picked up his tablet and began writing. A new list. Longer this time. Harder. More impossible. It did not matter. Humans were good at impossible things. He began making calls.